Hello and welcome to the start of the reading of An Odd Boy, a 4-volume series of monothematic memoirs by Togden or Ngak'chang Rinpoche. We'll start with An Odd Boy, Volume 1. Impressionism. Only an idiot would take pleasure in blackening a gnome. It's not an interesting topic. I'd not even wish to spin-doctor the situation into an anti-establishment art statement, because I don't believe that art should revel in belligerence. At the age of 13, however, I considered gnomes to be the gargoyles of the bourgeoisie, the worshipful emblems of suburbia. As such, they required righteous indignation, and I smote them in my mercy. I'd spontaneously rearrange people's wrought iron gates. They were easy to lift off their hinges, and I'd creep up and down the street at night, moving the gates. In the morning, everyone would come down and find they had someone else's gates. Could I call this my struggle against suburban values, situation art, environmental installation art? No, I was merely a whimsical wag bent on buffoonery. I grew out of it. I became an urbane spaceman rather than an amateur urban guerrilla. I grew into a gentler version of the antagonistic early adolescent I'd been. I need to write with enthusiasm. Where there's no enthusiasm, there is nothing to write. Writing about the wild dimension of the arts is more interesting by far than providing tedious details of the childhood of a stuttering dullard. My enthusiasm has always been inspired by the dimension of sensory experience. The fact that I have senses, and that those senses can explore the nature of reality, has always inspired me to be creative. Artistic creativity is a natural response to life. It's a communicative dance. The schools I attended never seemed to provide avenues of joy in relation to reality. I had the sense of living in a bank vault stuffed with incalculable wealth, but where I was being instructed on the ways in which one could arrange money in piles rather than spending it. The world is a fantastically exciting situation. The arts pervade everything. They take a direct line into the nature of reality, so when I discuss the arts, I'm discussing the nature of reality. I have an idea to present. Everyone is an innate artist. That seemed so obvious in the 1960s, and you didn't have to be some sort of philosopher to grasp the notion. So what do we do now, short of time travel? Time travel, as it's portrayed in science fiction, is not currently feasible, but there are other possibilities. If you want to time travel to the 1960s, you just need to open your eyes and allow your senses to function ever so slightly outside conventional parameters. You don't have to ingest psychoactive substances. You don't even have to don headphones and close your eyes. You merely need to let your senses do what they do, rather than following the dictates of codified societal legislation. You have to look at what is there. If you look at the colour, texture and sound of anything, anywhere, you'll observe the fabric of reality begin to glitter. Maybe glittering won't be the word you'll use to describe what you perceive, but it won't be a regulation societal term. Just take the time to stare with all your senses into life. There's a cosmology of sound constantly performing. Volume 1 of An Odd Boy contains Part 1, The Crossroads, which is simply the story of my attempts to be an artist in the world of the arts. The story runs from 1957 to 1968, from the age of 5 to 16. As my reminiscences began to evolve into a book, an uneasy notion stole over me. Whilst I have the right to tell my story, I have no right to tell anyone else's story. However, because everyone's history is woven into the annals of others, I couldn't avoid revealing aspects of those interconnected lives. So, should I pour praise on everyone? No, that would make tedious reading, but I wouldn't wish to disparage anyone either, especially those who may be quite changed by time. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool subjectivist when it comes to appreciation of the past and what happened in that exotic foreign land. I'm also a mythologist. I believe the best of those who illuminated my past with their creative presence. I believe the best of them because I chose them as my friends, heroines, heroes, and mentors. Why dwell on that which they themselves might choose to forget? Faced with this conundrum, I decided that personal names and places would be changed, except for the artists I mention. Where severely negative statements had to be made, the settings and events have been disguised. It was through Bob Dylan's book, Chronicles, that I realised it was possible to write autobiographically without writing an autobiography. Volume 1 of An Odd Boy is autobiographical in nature, but the theme is the arts as I've known them. I write of memories which relate to the arts, but my notion of what constitutes the arts may seem perplexingly broad and chaotic. Life itself is art. The ethos of time and place is art, if you happen to be touched by it. I don't pretend to be representative of the 60s. I'm not presenting carbon-dated fact. I'm simply describing the chaotic epoch that rings in my mind, even though 40 years have elapsed. As Bob Dylan said, I accept chaos. I'm not sure whether it accepts me. Part 1. December 1957 to June 1968. Chapters 1 to 13. Crossroads. If you want to learn how to make songs yourself, you take your guitar and you go to where the road crosses that way, where a crossroads is. Get there, be sure to get there just a little for 12 that night, so you know you'll be there. You have your guitar and be playing a piece there by yourself. A big black man will walk up there and take your guitar and he'll tune it. and then he'll play a piece and hand it back to you. That's the way I learned to play anything I want. Attributed to Tommy Johnson. Robert Johnson? No, I don't know him personally. I stone got crazy when I saw Sunhouse run down them strings with a bottleneck. My eyes lit up like a Christmas tree, and I said I had to learn that. That Mississippi sound, that Delta sound is in them old records. You can hear it all the way through. Of course, that was my idol, Sunhouse. I think he did a lot for the Mississippi slide down there. Man, you don't know how I felt that afternoon when I heard that voice, and it was my own voice. Muddy Waters. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Such is life, imaginary or otherwise, a continuous parting of ways, a constant flux of approximation and distanciation, lines of fate intersecting at a point which is no time, a theoretical crossroads fictitiously present, an unstable ice flow forever drifting between was and will be. The adventure called, and I followed with my thumb like a character being written by an intractable author, which of course I was. Sol Luckman from Beginner's Luke. There was a crossroads not that far from my home in a flat stretch of largely uninteresting farmland. And there was a thing I had to do there that defies description even today. I went there late one night to meet Legpa, but there was nothing there but fields that ran right up onto the road in every direction. It was far too cold for Mississippi and far too cold for me, but it looked pretty similar from what little I can remember. I came away with the shivers, but I played my wretched 4-string plastic guitar there for an hour, and it sounded worse than hell. It seems it's been that way ever since, but it was one hell of a ride. Farquhar Arbuthnot. Good times, bad times. Only thing I wanted anyone to say is, he could really play. He was good. The character Willie Brown from Crossroads. And next week we'll start with 3 weekly instalments, starting with Chapter 1, Alice in Wonderland. And in the meantime, if you're interested to know more about Dr. Togden, Ngak'chang Rinpoche and this Odd Boy series, there's a link here in the post to an interview with him.